Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by our friends at Fulcrum. I'm Barbara Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, and joined by our assistant webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. And we appreciate that you have stopped by for more than 20 years at directionsmag.com for feature articles, daily news, and of course, all those wonderful webinars. A warm welcome to Jake and Coleman from Fulcrum. They have some great information for us today to empower our field teams and have everyone working more effectively. Gentlemen, welcome. We are thrilled to have you with us today and excited to learn more.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you taking the time out today. We know you had other things you could be doing, and we really appreciate the fact that you're spending this hour with us. I'm Jake Freevold, and I'm here with Coleman McCormick. And the purpose of today's discussion is to talk about the value of having a dedicated platform to create a powerful ecosystem of mobile apps for field teams. That's actually quite a lot to unpack, and we'll be doing that over the course of the next couple of minutes. We'll do that with some use cases from real customers, and then we'll get an extensive demo from Coleman, and I know that's what a lot of you are here for, so I'm going to spend just a few minutes to set context, talking about those customers, and then I'm going to hand it off to Coleman. While I'm doing that, we would be very happy to take your questions, and we look forward to answering them at the end of the webcast. So let's get started. Here are 3 stories that I think are demonstrative of why a dedicated platform for field mobile apps is really critical. And I'll start with a disaster. Specifically, the County of Fresno had a major wildfire, the Creek Fire, in September of 2020, which is one of the largest disasters they ever faced. And they were required to provide FEMA with fire-related data to begin the recovery process. Now, anytime that you've got a disaster, you know that you need to respond quickly in order to ensure that FEMA starts the ball rolling with recovery funds and so on. And one of the issues that they immediately had is that they couldn't build an app quickly enough. It's not that they couldn't build an app, it's that they couldn't build it quite quickly enough. And they also knew that if they went out with paper and spreadsheets to capture information related to that natural disaster, that they would have some poor data quality. They would have to have people going back home, transcribing that data into maybe a spreadsheet for further import into other processes and into their GIS, and so on. So they actually had a consultant there who knew about Fulcrum, and they decided to use Fulcrum to convert this process into a mobile application-based process. Now, Fulcrum is a platform that enables people to create mobile applications that are dedicated to mobile data collection, to process automation, to workflow automation, and to generating data-driven insights. So they said if they can start that data collection process in Fulcrum and start driving information to the GIS, that would be a much more efficient way of managing the process than others that they would otherwise have tried. The other things that they needed to do was to deploy not just employees, but volunteers. In other words, there were people there who were not part of their organization, couldn't be relied on to have standard equipment, and had no idea of what kind of process was taking place. These were really the most naive of users you could get to go out and take pictures, take data, etc. And then finally, they had a lot of data to start off with in their GIS system already. So they wanted to be able to import about 8,000 records worth of road data into Fulcrum to be able to get that process started. This is not just a form collecting data. This is actually an app that's preloaded with data for people to use and potentially modify. And then finally, they needed all of that data to flow into the GIS. How well did the process work? The results included the first worksheet, that worksheet being delivered in 10 minutes. There were a number of other kinds of forms and mini applications that they needed to create along the way, so they ended up deploying the following morning to volunteers who were basically standing out in a parking lot waiting for instructions. They were able to support all of those volunteers' platforms, their mobile platforms, so there was no issue with trying to collect that information and having to, deploy dedicated iPads or anything like that out to the field. The road data that they had uploaded only needed updates, so if there was a situation where there was no problem, they wouldn't have to take any additional information. They could just check a box, or if there was something, they could take a picture and show that it was all good. And in the overall scheme of things, one of the most important aspects of it is that they could simply show how the application worked instead of trying to train people on what needed to happen. So the leader of Public Works and Planning IT was a guy named Pat, and he said that we could do something like that with our existing GIS platform, but they didn't have the luxury of time. So this story then is about speed. The field application platform, the no-code field application platform, providing speed that they otherwise would have a hard time getting. The next story is about Tilson. Now, Tilson is an engineering organization that does engineering, construction, and so on for telecom. And when the state of Kentucky wanted to provide broadband statewide, they called on Tilson to do it. And the challenge there was that with a load of 10,000 utility poles that needed to be inspected for engineering solutions, make sure that they were up to snuff, but make sure that you know what each engineering solution would be for each individual pole at each precise location, they ended up with that 10,000 is 20 times the largest jobs that they had done before and about 200 times the norm. Again, using Fulcrum, they were able to understand, they were able to find a way to easily eliminate the need for all of the different kinds of hardware that they would have previously needed to use, including separate cameras and GPSs and so on. And they had previously done a lot of work with data entry laptops, and that simply didn't scale and caused a lot of errors. We eliminated data silos. We are able to provide a lot of oversight from headquarters. So you get these teams of people, again, you're scaling way up. So a lot of these people are brand new. There's a fair amount of turnover going on. There's a lot of training that needs to occur. There was a lot of enablement. They were enabled from headquarters to be able to see exactly what was going on in the field, see these records as they were coming back, inspect the inspectors, if you will, and be able to provide quality assurance right from the get-go as these people were out in the field at that time. And again, with a high turnover environment, that easy-to-use app needed to be able to convert people to users very, very quickly, and they did that. The key thing here, I think, is that Fulcrum allowed Tilson to focus on what they were trying to accomplish rather than on mobile development, and that was even as they were trying to scale up massively. So if Fresno is about speed, Tilson is about scale. The third story is about Wonderful Orchards. I love this story just because it's so interesting, the number of things that they do. Wonderful is a great company that produces a large number of almonds, pistachios, pomegranates, other tree crops, over 85,000 dispersed acres. So you can imagine GIS is critically important to their entire operation. And what's most interesting is the number of things they've done with it. Food safety compliance is critical to them. For example, during harvest time, they need to make sure that they got portable toilets in place. Not the most glamorous job, but really critically important. And there's an occupational health and safety aspect to it where they have to make sure that there are no hazards or pesticide residues when people are coming into harvest. They need to remove mummy nuts, which sounds really interesting, but isn't quite as interesting. It's just the nuts that are left over from the harvesting process. Water is critical to them, as you can imagine, and it's really critical to have that in real time so that irrigation occurs correctly. And this one I find fascinating: beehives. I mean, if your bees are not in place at the right time, and if they're not active and healthy at the right time, then you lose the very short pollination window for these tree crops. So it's critical to them to have the beehives all in the right place and active and healthy all at the right times. So for Wonderful, what I find really, what I really love about this is that they talked about the things about one of the big things that you can't measure is buy-in from employees in the field. People who used to be reluctant to use technology, who kind of like the old way of doing things, now come to them with new ideas for how to apply this technology. So again, Fresno was about speed, Tilson was about scale. Wonderful Orchards to me represents the scope of work that can be done by a dedicated no-code field platform for mobile apps. So there are some common things about the benefits that occurred with each of these, even though they're kind of different aspects of benefits, speed, scale, and scope of work. There are definitely some commonalities about what they did for the people who were working on them. One of them was maximizing the value of the GIS that they had. There was already a ton of data in the GISs that they were using, and they were able to preload that information into the mobile apps that they wanted to use. And that includes maps. It's really important to be able to have somebody, stand at a certain point and know that they're on a political boundary, or know which road they're on, or be able to verify the specific location that they're currently standing in. And really importantly for those GIS users in all of these cases is the ability to get high quality data back into the GIS. So good data out of the GIS into the mobile apps, good data back into the GIS from the mobile apps. Obviously, the speed of deployment was really critical, the ability to be responsive to new ideas and enable rapid adaptation. I was talking to someone just recently about the way that sometimes some of their, more long-term employees really understand what's going on very easily. So they used to take a piece of paper out on their clipboard and they'd jot a note down about what they needed to do. And now with the mobile app, you can't do that. Well, you don't want them to revert to paper. So one of the really important things that you can do is they can call up headquarters, say, please adjust the app so that it asks this question because I forgot that you need to ask it. The person back at headquarters adds it. It's a trivial thing to do, as you'll see from Coleman in a minute. They hit save, the person out in the field hits sync, and now that question is right in place. That happens all the time with Fulcrum, and it's incredibly fast and easy to do, and extremely valuable for making sure that people have the kinds of flexibility and agility that they need. And finally, with respect to speed of deployment time, you're going to see that we capture location automatically, and Coleman's going to get into that pretty deeply as well. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're raising field productivity to the greatest extent possible. I've already talked about convincing reluctant users to use the technology. We had a guy in construction talking to us a little while ago, a VP of safety, who said that he was able to call up some of, again, longtime employees are the worst about this, right? They've been doing things the same way for 30 years, sometimes 40 years, and they don't know why they should adapt necessarily. And he called one up and said, I don't think this is that hard. Are you really telling me it's that hard? And the guy said, nah, it's not that hard. I can do it, Jim. So the guy changed his mind, changed his attitude, and was able to use the mobile apps because they're that simple and easy to use. Doing so avoids reversion to paper because of that adaptability, and because of the fact that you don't have to have separate paper maps from your other data collection kinds of documentation, and the fact that we have some of the best synchronization technology in the industry, where if you're down in one of the hollers of Kentucky, as someone else was talking to me about recently, they were still able to collect the data, and then once they come out of the hollers, they're able to synchronize that information back home, even when there was no Wi-Fi or cell service where they were trying to collect the information that they were getting. The bottom line for all of this is it means you get complete, high-quality data on a very consistent basis, and that makes a tremendous difference to the people who are trying to manage the processes back home, back with the GIS. So the Fulcrum platform, bottom line, is going to drive some intelligent automation throughout that process. Make sure that you're from GIS to the app through additional workflows and through some business intelligence will provide some automation of those processes. It'll maximize your performance and agility, and it does it without writing any code. It's going to make sure that you've got the valuable location in apps for the mobile team and ensure process rigor and compliance to make sure that everybody is collecting information in the same way or performing inspections in the same way or doing whatever's necessary in the same way, even if they're brand new to your organization. Really, one of the things that this does most is connect the field and the back office, which is often an issue for people who are supporting major field teams, as I've heard. And finally, all of this working together will digitally transform your safety, quality, and asset inspections, among other processes. So with that, I'd like to get out of the way and allow Coleman to demonstrate to you how Fulcrum works and some of the benefits that come from using it. Coleman?
By way of introduction, my name is Coleman McCormick. I'm the VP of Product here at Fulcrum, lead our product development activities and work with a lot of our customers. What I'm going to go through here is just a quick overview of the web platform. So Fulcrum's got a web application where you do your kind of building and data management, as well as reporting, analysis, those sorts of activities. And then there are native mobile apps for iOS and Android, and I'll be demoing the mobile portion on the iOS app today. To kick it off here, what you're seeing on my screen is the Fulcrum Web Dashboard. Down the center, you see our list of apps, as we call them in Fulcrum terminology. An app in Fulcrum is a field survey combined with the data within that project, as well as lots of other things like workflows and PDF, like printable report templates, some things that we'll get into kind of later in the demo. But down the middle there, you see the different apps. So you can think of an app as sort of like a particular use case or a particular type of data collection that you're interested in doing. What I'm going to demo today is this pole inspection example. So this is like a utilities use case. And I've got a sort of simplified version that we'll walk through. The first part that we're going to walk through is what we call the app builder in Fulcrum. Now that's where we actually build these out. So when you have a new Fulcrum account, you can start either from scratch, creating your own with our drag and drop interface by just going to new app here. And what you see is kind of a palette of data types on the left-hand side, and then your survey form as you're building it out here in the center. So each data type, and we've got a lot of different building blocks here, from text, numbers, date and time, to some pick lists and more advanced things like capturing media data, and then expressions and geocoded addresses, things that I'll get into in my examples. But this is very simple to use, designed to be able to give you a platform to build these out without any programming at all, to build out your own data collection app. So you just drag these into the middle, and each one's got its own settings that you can control. So before I get too far there, I was going to edit my example so that I don't have to go through and build the whole thing from scratch. So this is a pole inspection app that we've built out here with, you can see these are sections, so you can kind of group different fields together. A lot of that's for like process design or just cosmetics for how you want your field tech or your inspector to be able to be flowing through the survey. You can expand and collapse these. So an app in Fulcrum can be quite extensive depending on what you're trying to collect. There are no limits effectively to how long an app can be or how many fields it supports. You can add as many as you want. I'll dive into some of these here just to show you some of the flexibility and the power of the tool. If I was to add, let's say, a text field like this, each field type, as you add them into your app, has various settings. So the label is what you see, what the user sees as the kind of name of the field. This data name here is automatically generated. That's what becomes the column name in your data. So if you export data from Fulcrum or read it out from our API or do anything with it, it uses this as kind of a unique name for the field itself, which you can also customize. But then each field has a different set of settings specific to what that data type can do and does. So something like text is fairly straightforward. You can do required or not, and what that'll do is prevent data entry or prevent the user from actually submitting it if they don't complete that. You can do things like mark it hidden or read only. That's more for if you're importing data that you want a user to be able to reference but not modify. So something like if you have unique IDs or something that you want to maintain in the data, you can pull those in and have them uneditable. And then there's an ability on most fields to default to the previous setting. So if you were doing something that's repetitive and lots of the values default to the one I just did, let's say you're doing inspections along a street and there's 10 in a row and they all have the same street name, you can default it to the previous one you entered, so that it speeds it up. We've done a lot of things in the platform to try to optimize the experience for whoever is in the field, to minimize typing, maximize the kind of speed that they can get through the data without sacrificing the quality and correctness. A choice field lets you specify your own list of choices that would be in the drop-down menu, and you can order these as you like or sort them by alphabetical. Most fields in Fulcrum, if they're entry like this, have abilities to set validation. So something like a number field is a good example. So in this case, I've got a tag number, like the asset tag that would be on the pole itself. If I had requirements, or there were, if there was a specific format that that number was in, let's say, it's always 8 digits. I can go and set min, max on that. And I can also do on, let's see, I think it's on text fields here. I can set like a validation pattern. So you could do, you know, exactly 5 letters. And this is customizable too. So you can really finely control what's allowed at the kind of point of entry with the data, so that you get the highest quality stuff. We're trying not to replicate the days of pen and paper and transcription error and things like that, and really get it right at the point of entry. Photo field. Photos are extensively used by Fulcrum users, where right inside of a survey, they can take photos using the camera on a mobile device in line while they're collecting. So you can pop open the camera, snap a few photos, and have them embedded with that record as attachments that you can, you know, get access to later through the export tool. But a couple of neat things about photos. We have an annotations feature, which I have turned on in this example, that allows you to actually like sketch, you know, arrows or notes on the image for anything that's like an inspection or an audit. There are a lot of cases where you want to actually highlight what exactly you're trying to point out in the photo. So if there's damage, like circle the damage or something like that. And then we have a feature that can detect human faces in photos as well. If like you don't want to capture personally identifiable information, and maybe you shouldn't, depending on certain use cases. If there's accidentally someone in the background, it'll actually anonymize that. And using a on-device algorithm, computer vision algorithm, it'll detect faces before they're ever saved on the Fulcrum server. So that's an interesting kind of newer feature that we've added for photos. And then a couple more things here in the builder. We support expression fields, which we call calculation field. And this lets you define your own formulas for entering the data. So you can do things there, like if you're familiar with most GIS tools, you can create like expression-driven fields where the value in that field is the sum of 2 other fields or something like that. And we've modeled the Fulcrum calculation field on the same. It works very similarly to how formulas work in Excel or how expressions work in ArcGIS. So what we want is it to be very familiar to anyone that's used to those products. And what we see a lot of happening, and people will use the expression builder to create lots of different use cases. Like you can do it to create like scoring systems. So based on entry along the, you know, throughout the survey, if they enter 3 out of 5 on this field and they select these 2 options in a pick list, kind of generate an output score that you can then drive reports and other logic off of later on. So there's a lot of power under the hood with what you can do with calculations. We also support barcodes. So what that will do is, and I'll add one here, we can show this in the mobile app. It'll scan the contents of a barcode or a QR code and insert it automatically without the user having to type something in. So useful for things like asset tags or something where there's a label or a barcode present on a piece of equipment. The user can do that and avoid having to type and avoid having to make a mistake typing, because it's just kind of system entered. Yeah, so there's a lot of building blocks here to go through. I won't go all the way deep on all of them, and perhaps we'll get some some questions toward the end, which I can revisit when we get there. What I wanted to do now was to show this same example after I've created this app and I've set it to given access to my team members to be able to collect data with it. They would log in. So the Fulcrum mobile app is available on the app stores, on iOS App Store and the Google Play Store. They download the app, and then as an owner of an account, you have user management capability. You can invite other members from your organization. You can modify their role or their access settings and give them access to this app. So all they do is they download the app and then use the credentials they've set up to log in, and then they have access to whatever you've permissioned them for. So I'm going to toggle over to my mobile app here. And right now, in my app, we're looking at the in progress data in this project. So if I back up a screen, what you can see here, and I'm logged in as the administrator user, so I can see everything in this account. But if I was a field tech, I may only have access to the pole inspection app that we were just looking at in the app builder. So if I tap on that, I can see any and all data that I have permission to see. So what a lot of users will do is that you can create, you can set up the permissions such that they can only see things assigned to them or that they've been explicitly granted access to. So you can control kind of what they should be out there editing or creating. In this case, I've got access to the complete data layer. And there's a list view and a map view, so it defaults to the map view in Fulcrum today. There's some settings here where I can do things like filter. I only want to see like things that need inspection. Oops, I think I don't have it applied. So the user, when they're remote, they can kind of tweak their view to see only what they're interested in working with. In cases where you've loaded, tens of thousands of assets potentially in there that that you're trying to update in the field, you'd want to drill into just what I'm working with today, for example. I had one that I was looking at earlier that I can open, and we'll simulate that I'm doing a pole inspection on this at this point. So here at the top, you can see what I was talking about before with read-only fields. Like these examples, the tag number and the install date came from an original source data set that really what I'm using Fulcrum for in this case is to update the existing asset library. And that's a very common usage kind of pattern in Fulcrum, is to do that with an asset management use case. So obviously I don't want the user to be able to edit the install date or the tag number. I may want them to, collect a tag number if it got replaced or something like that. They may be able to let me know that. But as they punch down the list, this is like a multiple choice field. So they could set this, condition notes, could say trees need anything. They take a picture. This one I've already taken and attached to this example. If they do annotation, you can mark the location where the problem is, save it, and now my annotated photo is attached here. These are what we call yes/no fields, very creatively. They can, these are just quick button toggles, and then a signature, so they can actually sign the finger if they, I didn't show this, but you can actually customize this text at the bottom. We have many customers that use this to kind of present this to property owner or something like that, where they need to see some kind of a, what am I signing for? And you can customize that language. Oops. So I've saved that record, and you can see it's in a needs review status. That status field, this is also customizable. I've configured this in this example, and you can change kind of what colors represent what statuses. But if I save that, and we go back to the list view, you can see the little gray arrow there on the side. That means I have data saved locally that's not synced to the server. So I glossed over this fact, but one important note is that Fulcrum's mobile apps work completely offline. By default, it'll work completely offline. So once I sync and get the latest version of the mobile form, I can go offline and do data collection and just upload it when I'm back in range of connectivity. So I tap the button in the top right, that's the sync. Push that up, and you can see it's uploading. And now it's done. So the little green check mark indicates to us that that record is synced and good to go. It's live up on the server. So my supervisor or whoever's reviewing data as it comes in should be able to see it on the map. Now what I will do is I will switch back to our web application. And we'll look at the case of what happens now. So I have teams out doing these inspections. What am I doing with that data? So you can see here we have a record count. This is how many records are in that app. We have an activity feed over here on the side that shows you changes as they're happening. So you can see this first entry here a few seconds ago, Coleman updated one record in the poll inspection app, which I could click on and I could go straight to it if I was looking at it that real time. But the main tool that a user would use back in an office to manage data is what we call the data viewer. So this is what that interface looks like. So what you're looking at here is, collapse this out of our way. There's a map, there's a table, and then we can change this. We can look at only a map, we can look at only a table or a split view. And as I hover on either side, these two things are synced up with one another, so you can see where that is. What it does is it sorts by most recently changed data by default. So the one I just modified is at the top here. If I click on it and I go to quick view, I get this a similar view to what I was looking at on mobile. I can see all the values here. I can click on the photo. I can see that annotated circle that was drawn on the photo. The photo itself has its own geotag, so I can see where that picture was taken, which direction it was taken. All of this is for kind of assisting you in validating and vetting the data was correct and done where it was supposed to be, and just generally that kind of custody and trace back. That's helpful for data QA purposes. So yeah, and then here in the viewer, I can sort and filter on this as I need to. So I can go and there's some quick options over here. I can look at anything updated in the last 7 days. It's only the one I just edited. We can look at by status, or you can do things like on a date field, I can look at a date range, like a start and end date, and kind of filter that down. So this exists on all the columns, and I can hide and show, and I can do like I would do in a spreadsheet or a GIS attribute table. I can modify what I'm looking at. Another feature I wanted to show are a couple things here. We have an ability to download or export from this view. What this will do is whatever I'm currently looking at, if I click download, that's what it's going to download. So if I want to get only my completed work like this, say download data, and I can pick a whole bunch of formats that Fulcrum supports. Most of them some form of spatial data. So things like even GeoPackage and GeoJSON that are kind of newer, but then your traditional formats like shapefile and KML and whatnot. Totally preferential to user and based on where you're going to take the data and where you're going to put it. But we try to make it as easy as possible to get at your data as quickly as you can too. So an interesting piece that is a fairly recent addition over in the last couple of months, we've added Esri feature services as an output. So if I go up here, the way you get access to that is if you save a view, and I'd rather actually keep it open here. If I save a view and I call it all inspections, and I make it a shared view, what shared views do is generate an internet addressable link to this data source in various formats. So like CSV, JSON, KML, and Esri feature service. So I can copy this link, make sure that's saved. And I already have a project open here, a ArcGIS Online project with some data layers added. These are not in Fulcrum. These are, this is actually Vermont geodata. It's where this data set is that we were just looking at. So these are pre-existing vector layers added to a map project. And what I can do is add a web service and that URL from Fulcrum. And this is our data loaded live from Fulcrum as a feature service. So you can see it defaults the symbology to match the status field colors from the Fulcrum side. Once it's in ArcGIS, you can modify that just like you can with the symbology tools on any other kind of data source. But I can click on a record, see its data just like I could in Fulcrum. Oops, that's not the right one. What we're trying to show here, there it is, there it goes. You can customize these popovers, which I've done a little bit here to show some of the data without having to click through. So I can even see the photo that came over, and you can see here it's loading the one we just created from my phone. So what's interesting here is now if I have active project going on or active work, and I have other users in my organization that are using ArcGIS Online as a dashboard or a day-to-day operations tool, they don't even need to know what's going on in the Fulcrum side. Like field ops teams can be using Fulcrum, and someone else in a different business unit can be inside of ArcGIS and seeing the results without having to go to Fulcrum. But if they wanted to, like I inserted a link here to open it in Fulcrum. If they wanted to go in and say, show me more, they can click through and see the raw data on the Fulcrum side. So we'll switch back over here. So I showed exporting. What I wanted to point out too was that we can do imports. Like that data, any data for use cases like that frequently would be imported, or you'd be starting with your, source data set and then updating it from there. And the way you would do that is you build out your app like I did in the builder, and then there's an import wizard. So here I'm not going to walk through it, but it's a wizard where if you have CSV or shapefile, you can basically map the fields, field to field from your imported data set into the app. So you can connect up what fields go where, do that mapping. Fulcrum does some auto processing on it to detect, to try to help you if it can detect it thinks this field goes here, it'll automatically recommend some of those things and step you through it, and it'll do like pre-detection if it sees there's any errors or anything like that before it loads it in. But that's used very commonly by anyone with that kind of a use case where you're trying to bring data into the system for update. Let's see, how are we doing on time? I'll go through a couple more things and then I think we can go to some questions. But we have a workflows tool that is pretty interesting. What it allows you to do is define operations that can happen automatically based on triggers and actions. So what we have that we support here so far is various kinds of notifications. So we support email, SMS, and webhooks right now, and webhooks for like more system to system integrations of data. But what I've created here as an example is an email notification that triggers when an inspection gets marked as needs review. If I walk through this, it kind of explains to you what it's doing. When this happens, like when this trigger happens and a criteria is true, in my case, the status is equal to needs review, then do this. And this is where you select the action that you want to output. So if you pick email, you can then kind of modify or customize to your specific requirements or preference what you want that email to say. So I could, have a subject line, I've got who the email is going to go to, and then insert things into the message body, including like a link to the record in Fulcrum. So this is like allowing you to create your own email alerts or text alerts based on your own criteria. And you could get creative with this and add multiple filters and, very specific requirements in case you have cases where you only want an alert in some like high criticality scenario or something like that. It allows you to build that out. This is a tool that's fairly new to the product, and we're continuing to improve this and add to that suite of triggers and actions, so that'll continue to get better over time. And then one final thing, and then we'll, I think, move to Q&A, is our report builder tool. So I didn't show it earlier, but any record in Fulcrum, you can actually generate a PDF report of it. Useful for things like if your case is a building inspection or something that results in a deliverable like document you want to email to a customer or to a supervisor or something like that, or a property owner, whoever it might be. From the app builder, I can go to reports and I can click to create a report. And here, this is what we call our basic builder. It shows me here the PDF output preview of what this report will look like. And what it does, I mean, this starts with some defaults, and I can turn on and off a lot of different settings here, including specific fields I want hidden. If I don't want all of it to appear on the report, I can customize that. And yeah, a lot of this metadata is here. It shows a little map preview on its own, and then it prints out the data. And then you can pick records from your data to use in the preview, so you can kind of test different permutations of output to make sure the report looks right. And then once you have this set up, let's say I make that active. Anytime I'm back in my data and I generate, I'll show you where that is real quick. If I go to an individual record and I select print, it's actually generating on the fly a report from that location with my photo, kind of nicely formatted. And we have an advanced builder as well that lets you actually go and fully modify the look and feel of the entire thing. Signature gets embedded in there. And then these can be wired into the workflows as well that I was showing. So you can have it triggered to generate the report and automatically email it to someone as it's validated or as it's meeting that criteria through the pipeline. So that was a lot of the product. I think trying to give a good sense for the different pieces and how the full flow works. I guess now we can move into some Q&A with the end of the time that we have here.
Actually, before we do that, I would just very quickly like to show a couple of quick things. First of all, we're very proud of what we've done here. Coleman's gone through a ton of technology, and one of the most important things about the fact that we've won awards for creating this technology is that it is something that is most implementable, meets best meets requirements, and these are for mid-market and small businesses as well. So we do work in the enterprise, but everything we do here is easy enough to manage that we end up getting a lot of small to mid-sized businesses using it as well because they see the value in having something that's that easy to use. The other thing I'd like to show is how to get a free trial of Fulcrum. If you go to our homepage, which you see here, in the upper right-hand corner, it says try it free. And if you click on that, that will take you to a page where you can register for a free trial. So I encourage you all to do that. It's pretty great technology, and we look forward to seeing you come in and kick the tires and really check it out. And thank you, Barbara, just put the URL for that into the chat. So with that, then we can move on to questions and answers.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Lots of great questions coming in really quickly. So we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. All right, Coleman. So if I download the app on my phone from the Play Store, can I create a new app on my phone?
That's a good question. No, the mobile app is really the collection interface. So the app creation and customization that I showed is all through the web browser, through the web dashboard.
Cool. Can I create a standard list or database of vegetation types that are used in multiple apps?
Yes, that's a good question as well. There is a feature we call choice lists, which I did not go into detail on, but what it lets you do is where I showed you the choice field where you can modify the drop-down options. There's a separate place where I can define what we call a choice list. That is those options pre-configured. And then I can, when I make a choice field, I can link it to that choice list. And then the choice list can be linked into multiple apps. So it's kind of like creating one master list, if you will, that can be maintained in one place instead of in several apps.
Okay, very good. Another app-related question, is there an API that I can use to integrate Fulcrum with other apps?
Yes, there is. There's a couple of things that we have. We have a full REST API that really supports everything that you saw the mobile app doing, most things you saw the web side of this doing are all powered by our own. We use our own API for all of this. So almost anything you saw, you can do over the API yourself. And we didn't go into the configuration of that, but you can create API tokens and kind of get into that at will. We actually have very good API docs out there at docs.fulcrumapp.com. You can look at what the API documentation or all of the capabilities of what you can do with it.
Excellent. So we've got a question. We'll transition here to some data related questions. For creating an Esri feature service from the Fulcrum data, is there a live connection to the Fulcrum data set, or does it need to be refreshed every time the data in Fulcrum changes?
I believe that it is controlled on the destination side. So on the, like if you were loading it in ArcGIS Online like I was, you can set the refresh rate to how often it's reloading it. it will load as many times as it's hitting that endpoint. It'll give you the current data. I forget what the defaults are, but most tools where you can add a feature service default to some value that like half an hour or 15 minutes or something like that. But I believe it's customizable wherever you're loading it from.
It's probably also worth mentioning, Coleman, that the most frequent place you see updates is when you do pan and zoom, because then it's going out and refreshing that data live.
It's hitting it again. Yeah, exactly.
Good point. So you mentioned, you were talking about the status field, and someone would like to know, is the status field in the demo app a specific type of field?
It is it's a built-in field type. So it's not one you turn it on or off, or you choose to use it or not in an app. Any app can have a status field, but it can only have one. So it's defined when I was showing the app builder. It's a setting over in that right-hand panel to control. And I didn't open it up and look at it, but the status is you set the name and the color and that stuff kind of in one place. But yeah, you can disable the status field completely on an app if it's not relevant, or customize it if you need.
You mentioned earlier that they can download maps from Esri to Fulcrum, and someone wants to know how to do that.
Oh. Yeah, you can. There's a couple of things. We support offline map packages through a format called MB tiles. That is how you would do it if you're trying to create offline layers. For online or connected layers, if you already have data in something that's hosting that data, you can add it through WMS. And there are many different web services or map servers that support WMS as an output. And yeah, ArcGIS being one of them. But the caveat there is you have to have internet access on your mobile to get that to load.
Right. That makes good sense.
Yeah.
Next question for you. Does Fulcrum support inspection actions allowing to flag the inspected asset by changing the color or the symbol of the asset?
I think it depends on what that means. I think you can you can customize the status like I showed. We have a feature that's more of an advanced feature called data events that's configurable within the app builder. Data events, the best way to put it is like a scripting environment to modify the behavior of the mobile app. So you can do things like, the reason we have that is so that customers can define very, very specific behaviors that they want that are unlikely to be easy to build an environment to build it, right? So if you wanted, let's say, to when the status gets moved to need review, like I did in my example, that you want like other fields to magically appear and do other things like that, you can customize all that in the data events interface. So that's another thing that's available on our developer documentation, and that's extremely powerful to let you go nuts with customizing that data collection flow.
Absolutely.
We have lots of customers that do that. And things like, a good example would be, some users want the status to be set programmatically based on what they're entering in the data. So let's say like the inspection fails because of what I've entered, rather than me setting it manually. You can do things like that, like define what that logic is.
That's great.
Hey, Coleman, having said all of that, I think if I can be the simplistic marketing guy for a second, if we pull back to what the question said about can we support inspection actions by flagging the inspected asset by changing the color of the symbol, it's certainly possible, and we do this all the time. You inspect an asset and it passes or fails or needs investigation. That's green, red, and yellow. That status can be set to those three or whatever arbitrary list you want, and it can have its own color. And that way, when it does show up on a map, whether in Fulcrum or in Esri or other GIS tool, that asset will show up with that color at that location. So if that's what the person is asking for, it doesn't require any code, and is a pretty straightforward solution to what they're asking about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Excellent. But I know that those highly customizable things in terms of workflow might be really appealing to some folks as well. So that's great to know.
Absolutely.
Question about reports. Can the reports be generated to house multiple photo and or text note records?
Yes. If you collect, we have lots of customers that what I showed where there was one photo. We have lots of customers that one record might have 15, 20 photos, many depending on the requirement. What it'll do is it'll print them all in the report, and you can customize like the size you want them, like thumbnails or larger and things like that. But yeah, it'll insert whatever's in the data into the report.
That's great.
Yep.
Folks would like to know if Fulcrum is planning to support line data as well as point data.
We are. Yes, I don't have a timeline for that, but that's something we're looking at right now. Is probably first will be like attribution of existing line and polygon data, and then later actually editing the geometry itself or creating it, so creating actual shapes and lines from the mobile. Yep.
That's great news for folks.
Oh yeah.
All right. So I know that you talked about a number of scenarios for folks, but just to circle back around to that, someone's talking about different types of missions in terms of mapping, inspections, night operations, disaster response. I mean, maybe touch on that one more time in terms of, can we use it in these different scenarios? And, are there maybe some things that we need to know about particular types?
Yeah, I mean, it's used today in dozens of different kinds of scenarios. Most use cases are some form of inspection or asset management or observational kind of data collection. But there's a lot going on kind of around the edges too, with just we hear all the time of use cases we never thought of and kind of creative ways to deploy it. It's very flexible. So, Jake touched on some, which I thought was a great kind of sampling of different stories of how the product's being used, including like some of the disaster response work folks have done with Fulcrum is pretty impressive. Given the lack of connectivity and lack of infrastructure generally in a lot of those cases, and still being able to deploy tech for like damage assessments and things like that.
That's wonderful.
So it might be, I know we're wrapping up on time. It might be worth mentioning that if you go to fulcrumapp.com/customer-stories, or you can find it in the menu, of course, you'll find couple dozen stories at least, and they range from clearing mines in Southeast Asia to doing environmental work related to light pollution that causes problems with tortoises going the wrong direction when they hatch, to water requirements, water meter inspections, irrigation, drainage issues. Asset management, VicTrack is, Victoria, Australia's railway system, and that's all managed by Fulcrum, as well as things like engineering, a lot of engineering, earthquake readiness inspections, fire safety inspections in Santa Barbara County, and so on. I really recommend you just go out and peruse some of the stories at fulcrumapp.com/customer-stories, and you'll get a really good sense of the breadth of operations that we do.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. We are out of time today, but I know that we have given folks a lot to think about. So thank you again to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope that you will keep an eye on your inbox. We will be sending you a link to the recording as well as your attendance certificate, and appreciate your opinions on the brief survey on the way out. Thanks again to Jake and Coleman for sharing their expertise, Matt in the background for his support as well, and we hope that you will join us for more geospatial webinars. Have a great day, everyone, and tell a friend about Fulcrum and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everyone.